How's it going, guys? Chris Calder here with part 7 in my RapidComposer tutorial series. This one's going to go over the structure inspector, and this video is the first that ties right into the newly revised RapidComposer manual, which I've been working on for the past month. In the manual, we're mentioning tutorial videos that'll help you understand, the functionality of the program better. Everybody loves tutorial videos, and that is why we make them. So this is the first that's tied right into the new manual. Okay, so to access the structure inspector, we can click this icon right here, or we can right-click Master Track. Here is the structure inspector, and this is how everything's laid out inside of it. The first thing right here is your entire composition. This is where you set your tempo, your time signature, your scale or key. Now this is a global setting. Anything underneath this can override the global setting. So you see part 1 and line 1, that's basically the first 4 bars of this composition. I threw some finger picking generators in over a very simple chord progression. Here's how it sounds. Alright. Now you could add new parts before or after themselves. Alright. So to make things easy, I'm just going to add a new part after this part. So this is a 4-bar sequence on bars 1 through 4. And these plus signs mean add a part before or after. So the top one means before, the bottom one means after. Okay, so I'm going to add a new part right after this one. And as you can see, if I hover the mouse long enough, you'll see the little tooltip pop up. So the cool thing about this is if you click this plus sign, it's going to keep the same exact chords and the same exact length of this part, and it's going to add it right after, but it's going to wait for you to put in your own phrases. So I click it. As you can see, it kept my the chords that I had already assigned, and it's saying, hey, what phrases do you want in here? So it's really cool. So now we have a composition that's basically 8 bars long, and part 1 is, with this finger picking generator, and part 2 is right here waiting for new phrases. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to go right to part 2, and if you double click, RapidComposer automatically creates a time selection for that part. So if I double click part 1, there it is. If I double click part 2, there that is. If I double click this, it's going to show the entire composition. Now there's keyboard shortcuts for each of these things. So double click part 1. If I hit the number 0 on the keyboard, it shows the entire composition. Now from here, I could hit the number 1, and it's going to show only line 1 of part 1. If I hit the number 2, it's going to show line 1 of part 2. Okay, there's number 1, number 2. It's just me hitting the keyboard. So you can access each part of your composition directly, and RapidComposer automatically creates a looped time selection, or at least, this is highlighted. I think you have to hit, the loop thing to hear it looped. But very useful stuff. All right, so I'm hitting the number 1, and it's part 1, line 1. Hitting the number 2, part 2, line 1. Hit the number 0, shows the entire composition. Very cool. Okay, so now to understand the hierarchy of the structure inspector, there's parts and there's lines. Underneath the parts, you could have any number of lines you want, and they're always tied to that part. Okay, so let's assume part 1 is our intro. Okay, I deleted part 2 because what I want to do is I want to make part 1 8 measures long with these finger picking generators over these chords. So instead of clicking this plus sign that belongs to the part, I'm going to click the line, and I'm going to add another line. Okay, so now we have part 1 is going to be 8 bars long. I'm going to fill this with finger picking generators by hitting the N on my keyboard. It's a keyboard shortcut. In line 1, it's these chords, and in line 2, it's these chords. But here's the thing. Here's something really easy. You could change the chords of line 2 So for instance, I'm just going to make them the relative minors, all right, instead. So now, part one is this entire thing. It's all finger picking. And the first half of it are these chords, and the second half are these chords. If I want to access the line directly, I just double click it, or I can use the keyboard shortcuts. So I can use the number 1 to access line 1, the number 2 to access line 2. And then again, hit number 0, shows the entire composition so far. So part 1 is our intro. It is basically CF, CF, A minor F, A minor F. So we're going to add another part. We're going to call this the verse. Okay? So all I did was I had this highlighted. I clicked the plus sign at the bottom, which means add after. So now we have part 2. Now notice how the chords are all the same as part 1. Now we can change this. So let's assume, I don't know, we'll make the verse D minor, F, I don't know, G, and A minor. And notice how it created 2 lines, just like part 1. To make things really easy, so we don't have to type our chords again, we could delete the second line and then just add this. Then it keeps the same progression. Very smart. Again, RapidComposer. You know, it's called this for a reason. So now we have part 1, which is our intro. Okay, finger picking generators over this chord progression. Part 2, an 8-bar sequence with different chords. So, you know, let's assume we just want to make the entire thing finger picking, all right? So with this, you know, fill the track with finger picking generators. Now maybe we want to add the bass, you know, coming into this verse, okay? So we want to add some bass generators coming into this verse. We could if we wanted to. So all we got to do is, you know, I change this to the bass sound font. Going to add some bass phrases. Your phrase browser is going to look different than mine, of course, because this is all test stuff that I've done. So we're going to revise this. We're going to clean it up. And when you guys get the new update, you will see everything in there. So, all right. So we're going to take, we'll just do baseline 1, I guess. So I have this highlighted, and I'm going to hit the letter F. It creates, you know, the bass lines through that. So part 1, no bass line, just finger picking. Part 2, our verse, bass line comes in, chords are different. If we want to show the entire composition, again, we hit the number 0. Bam! So long song that took, you know, just a few minutes to make. All right. So let's listen to it. All right. Let's see what we got. Now, of course, you know, I know it's a little repetitive, but I'm not trying to win any Grammys, as I always say in every video. Okay, here's the verse. Now say, as I'm listening to it, or as I'm writing lyrics or whatever, I say, you know what, this verse, I'd like to double the length of this verse. Very easy. You know, basically, there's our intro, there's our verse, and let's say we wanted to make the verse twice as long. We just click part 2, which is, there's our verse, and automatically creates a part 3, but there's no phrases in it yet, so showing the entire composition, and highlighting this track, filling it with finger picking generators. So we're putting some bass generators here, and we could hold Alt and drag them. And there we go. So now the composition is basically an intro, a verse, and then a verse twice as long. And part 1, again, we're making mental notes. Part 1 is our intro, part 2 is our verse, part 3 is our extended verse. All right, so that's the basics of how it works. Obviously, you can get a lot more involved, but just for this tutorial, we are just keeping it simple. So again, there's our entire composition. It's basically 24 bars long. Part 1, if we double click, that's our intro with just finger picking generators. Part 2 is our verse, different chords, plus a bass line. Part 3 is the same thing as part 2. So hopefully you guys understand a little bit more about the structure inspector and how useful it is to build a composition part by part.